Basement, level vibes with another one, straight up, blackness aye. Who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends and big up my family. Turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity. Straight up, Benscop stands for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny. Free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see. The deaf can hear, the dumb can talk, the cripple can walk. Boom. Who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, we have to gather wrong, grab a seat and sit down, pay attention. Education, liberation, we have to stand strong. Benscop upon the radio, lively up the program. Everybody call somebody and let them turn and tune and on the radio and catch the boom song. We boom it up already, we have to boom it up again. Expose and reveal him. Who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the truth. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the truth. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends and big up my family. Turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity. Straight up, Benscop stands for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny. Free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see. The deaf can hear, the dumb can talk, the cripple can walk. Boom. Who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benscop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benscop, straight up from the root. Mark Benscop, who tell the truth? Mark Benscop, defend the ghetto.
Hello, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
All right, it's Emancipation evening, right? It's night, and wherever you are, it's Emancipation Day. Yep. All right, Emancipation indeed. Don't forget to support these businesses. You see them. You see the law firm there, Shellen Washington. You get the Andrews Supermarket out there in Guyana. And then in Brooklyn, you have Exquisite Hair Palace. Go down there, and these guys are going to take care of you. This weekend, I'm going for a haircut. Trust me. I can't plait my hair or do extension or anything like that. I'm not really into the extension thing, but some of you guys, Jason, if you're into if you're into extensions, Garfield Collins and so forth, when you need your haircut, head down there to Brooklyn Avenue there. They have qualified barbers. Some of you, if you're looking for a job, the PPP love to say that Burke doesn't work. Maybe Burke can head down there and rent one of those chairs and become a barber. And I can be right next to him there doing hair, washing hair, doing extensions, right? Jason Benjamin, go down there, do an extension and so forth. Never be afraid or ashamed to do what you got to do, right? All right. So, hey, guess what? My name is Mark Benshop. I saw this picture. I saw this photograph, and to me, this tops the list. It's right on top there. Look at what's happening there. Beautiful, beautiful African princess out there in Guyana celebrating Emancipation Day. Happy Emancipation Day to all of you. Some people might say, what is so happy about the day? But apart from happening in Guyana and the disrespect and so forth, we can still say happy, right? We can still say happy after all what our ancestors endured. So we have to be thankful. Not sure what's happening with our camera. It looks as though it's time for us to check on eBay or maybe Amazon for something cheaper, right? But good evening to all of you, every single one of you. We're going to rock and roll this evening. Last evening, you guys. Sorry, we had to correct that, right? Last evening, I don't know how to even start tonight's show. I'm kind of like, really, I don't know. After that stellar performance by Wayne Caesar, and then he had his guest on, Anna Ferguson, Member of Parliament. I don't know where to start, what to do, but we got to give Wayne Caesar some good ratings for what he did last evening. And John, I know my camera is jumping. Thank God it's just my camera that's jumping, because they would have charged me like they charged Patterson, right? They're persecuting Patterson, persecuting Patterson there. All right, so I'm just reading some of your comments. You guys were all happy with last night's performance. Maybe I should take a couple of days off, but I think Wayne Caesar did an excellent job. This evening, guess what, guys? I want to talk to Roysdale Forde. He is senior counsel. He's also a member of parliament, a guy that's running around there in Guyana all over, winning lots and lots of cases, putting Anil Nandalal to shame. And guess what? Oh, this is in the, thank you so much, Lemon. This is in today's Village Voice. It says, a day of pride and self-recognition, emancipation message from Roysdale Forde. Let's get straight to Roysdale Forde. Mr. Operator, can we have Mr. Forde on, please? There we go. Good evening to you, sir. And how are you?
Hi, good evening, Mark. Good evening to your audience. I'm doing well. Happy Emancipation to you and to your audience.
Thank you so much, Mr. Forde. Happy Emancipation to you and to your family and everyone that you come into contact with as well. What's the day like? What has the day like been? I mean, what has it been like for you this day? Sorry.
Well, Mark, I'm not in Guyana today.
Are you you're in China?
No, I'm not. I'm not in China.
Because you know who is in China and not there to celebrate with the Guyanese people. I know you're not there in China, but what this day means to you, sir?
Mark, today means, as emancipation is a very important day for me. It's a day in which I believe that myself and all Guyanese, particularly African Guyanese, must reflect on the struggle of our ancestors, the ability to persevere and overcome great difficulty and great affliction that our people would have endured. Today is also a day in which we must consider where we are and what is necessary for us to be able to provide a good future for ourselves, for our children, and then be able to stand in the present moment and to contemplate the challenges that we face, which are presented to us by a government that seems very similar to the oppressive governments and oppressive regimes that would have confronted our ancestors. We have been able to persevere and overcome those challenges, those oppressions, and those tribulations. And I believe it is a source of strength that we could consider that we came from a very strong people, and whatever we're going through would not be able to compare, and certainly therefore it must be a source of strength and a source on which we could rely to equip ourselves with the necessary tools that we need to confront the challenges that we face.
Lots of challenges indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Roysdale Forde, Senior Counsel, also Member of Parliament. And for those of you who are now joining us, welcome to this live broadcast on August 1st, 2023. And we should say, hope you guys are enjoying the Emancipation Day, whatever is this day to celebrate in Guyana. I've been hearing that the persons commenting, and based on what I've seen myself and observed, is that the regime, the installed regime, PPP regime, has not spent much time focusing on Emancipation Day and the celebrations and so forth. And a lot of African Guyanese folks feel disrespected. What is your take for the part that the non-participation of most of those in the regime for such an important day in Guyana?
Mark, personally, I am not disappointed. I believe that at some point the Guyanese people, particularly the African Guyanese, must understand that the government fundamentally, through its One Guyana program, is not committed to equality. They're not committed to an environment in which African Guyanese and African Guyanese culture and commemorative activities play any center in the Guyanese society. So personally, I'm not disappointed. I'm not surprised that they've decided not to play a very important role in these celebrations. We see from their activities that they, especially when you look, Mark, in relation to what they consider to be this One Guyana program, to me it's lacking in sincerity, and we see the same issue coming up in their absence from these commemorations.
Their absence indeed. Not much pride at this point in time. Look, I've made a post and I basically said that because I've seen a lot of companies, some companies and so forth, are just saying Happy Emancipation Day to all Guyanese, and not a mention of our African brothers and sisters in Guyana. This day is specifically for persons of African descent, and we must not run away from that. Of course, all of us as Guyanese are welcome. We join in the celebrations of the freeing of those Africans who were enslaved and those Africans who worked, our foreparents who worked really, really hard to build Guyana from a swamp to a success story today. So I feel insulted when people say Happy Emancipation Day to all Guyanese, as not specifically saying African Guyanese brothers and sisters. Because I know during Diwali we say, hey, Happy Diwali, not to all Guyanese, but Happy Diwali to our Indian brothers and sisters. Happy Pagwa to our Indian brothers and sisters. And we must not shy away from specifically saying Happy Emancipation Day to all of our African brothers and sisters. Nothing is wrong with that, Mr. Forde?
No, Mark, I don't believe that anything is fundamentally wrong with that. The commemoration deals with African Guyanese. I don't see anything wrong with paying particular attention and particular focus, which it should be, on the struggles of the African Guyanese people to overcome and what they endured during the period of slavery, which lasted hundreds of years. I believe that it is a national occasion, nevertheless, but the government does not pay the sort of, and has not paid, in particularly this celebration this year, the sort of attention that we ought to have played and focused on it in terms of a national spotlight.
You know, going back to what you say, and point well taken there, Mr. Forde. You did say in the article in the Village Voice, and on this Emancipation Day, we deliver this message to ExxonMobil. And all concerned have a conscience. Talk to ExxonMobil and others. What conscience and what sort of conscience do you expect them to have? And what should they be doing?
Mark, in answering that question, I want to go back just to start at the point of the African Guyanese contribution to Guyana. As a race, as a group of people who came to Guyana, the foundations of this country were laid by African Guyanese. There can be no denial of this historical fact. The building of the dams, the canals, the seawalls, which was the foundation of the colonial exploitation that would have occurred, these matters cannot be denied. So at this point, Mark, our people would have endured hundreds of years of enslavement, and at the conclusion of that period of enslavement, they were not paid any sort of reparations by the colonial government. They were not given the opportunity, and these are historical facts, they were not given the opportunity to equip themselves to be as useful as they could have been. But nevertheless, Mark, by their own industry, they were able to acquire villages. They were able to purchase lands and to engage and embark in a process of self-actualization and self-empowerment. We know that that experiment by the African Guyanese people and our ancestors, by the colonial government, would have been thwarted on many occasions and in many ways, to varying degrees of success in favor of the colonial empire. Mark, we are at a period where the country is now growing at 60-something%, the fastest growing economy in the world. And whilst we look to the question of reparations from the colonial empire, I believe that the Guyanese nation and the state of Guyana has an obligation to the African Guyanese people, has an obligation to deal with the issue of reparations. This is not a matter that the colonial powers are solely responsible for, because I recall reading among the independence documents and the colonial independence instruments which were given to Guyana on the 26th of May 1966, Guyana as a state became the successor to Great Britain. And among the obligations, among the travesties that our independent nation would have taken responsibility for and in respect of, is the blight and the inhumanity of slavery. So at this point, Mark, where we have a great economic bounty, I believe that Exxon, as an exploiter of these resources, have a moral obligation to the Guyanese people, particularly the African Guyanese people, having regard to the circumstances of Guyana today, to ensure that there is equitable resource allocation and opportunity. And the government itself is under an obligation to ensure that by disbursements of these resources, that the Guyanese people receive, and particularly the African Guyanese people, in context of their historical contribution and sacrifice, that they receive by way of entitlement and not by way of begging, a fair share of the economic resources and all the other resources and opportunities in this country.
Roysdale Forde, Senior Counsel, also Member of Parliament, is with me this evening. Happy Emancipation Day to all of you who are now joining us. I want to ask you a question concerning, as we stray away for a moment from Emancipation Day. Sarah Lynch, the now former U.S. ambassador to Guyana, is now former. She's no longer there, but we have an incoming ambassador there from the U.S. to Guyana. What are some of the expectations? What, assuming that Ambassador Nicole, is watching at this time, assuming she might have other things to do, but what message would you like to send to her as she prepares to head to Guyana very shortly, in terms of doing things that would embrace all Guyanese? What's your message to her?
Mark, in relation to that question, I would start off by pointing out that currently the government is in breach of a number of international conventions. the government is in breach of the democratic principles upon which any state, and Guyana rests on. The government has been at variance in terms of its approach to allocation of economic resources. The government has continued to engage in serious acts of corruption against the state of Guyana. I believe that the issues of the electoral system must be seriously raised and considered. The need to have a fair, creditable electoral process, with particular attention being placed on a credible voting process, a reliable and credible voting list, the need for and the introduction of biometrics in our electoral system. I believe also we need to complete the process of decentralization of power to the regions or the local government system. The government continues to intervene in those processes. I believe that the National Assembly fails to deliver the sort of oversight power over the executive, the failure to constitute and appoint Chancellor and Chief Justice. So, Mark, there's a wide range of issues. The government's failure to ensure that Exxon complies with the economic obligations of its agreement, the issues in relation to the environment, which are the subject of judicial decisions by our courts. So I believe that the incoming ambassador, in conversation with myself, will be given a wide range of matters which she should focus on, Mark.
A wide range of those things indeed, because people are still uncomfortable with what transpired there at the last general and regional elections. And these are important things that folks are expecting the new ambassador to focus on in terms of meeting with a wide cross section of Guyanese as well, and to speak out on human rights issues and persecutions and so forth. How does it make you feel at this time, especially looking at some of the messages that the regime puts out? They have been putting out there, but they are persecuting individuals even as we speak. The matters pertaining to Lowenfield, Miss Roxanne Myers and Mr. Mingus and others are still lingering in the courts. How does this make you feel, sir, as a lawyer, that these matters are still lingering in the court?
Mark, I personally am quite upset about it, as you asked what is my personal view. But we must understand what is happening in the country. The government continues to utilize the tool of the institution of court proceedings against their perceived persons who will not support them. They'll be doing it against members of the opposition. And I believe the institution of the charges against the electoral officers were particularly aimed not only at destroying in the government's effort their integrity, their reputation, but was to remove them out of GCOP and out of the important offices that they held. I believe after 2 to 3 years now, we are almost heading, well, tomorrow would be 3 years since the government would have been installed. And the failure to commence one single charge shows the government's inability to produce evidence to support their allegations which would have been made against these persons.
Absolutely, Mr. Forde, no evidence at all. Going on 3 years now, nothing, absolutely nothing at all. How you're a lawyer, and you have been a lawyer for 20-something years. And I like to remind people that when you first started, one of the biggest cases you ever had in Guyana, around the Caribbean and the world, was to represent a particular person on that trumped-up treason charge. You know who that person is, right? Thank you. I say thank you again for being there. A lot of people think that you just probably come on the block, but you've been there for quite some time, and you've done a heck of a lot of pro bono works. I can personally attest to that, especially when you represented that guy in that trumped-up treason charge. He was much younger then, too. We both were. How does it make you feel, though, about people losing confidence in the justice system, seeing the way that they're operating with recent matters concerning what transpired with the DPP, no charges, no nothing, and then they rush to charge other persons with little minor issues. But here it is that we have persons who have been charged allegedly with electoral malpractices, allegations, and of course they're being persecuted. But how does it make you feel concerning the justice system?
Mark, as an attorney at law, you are obligated to support the rule of law. You're obligated to support the justice system. But Mark, and you are encouraged and required to address issues in public and to ensure that the public retain a certain degree of confidence in the judicial system. Mark, what has happened, particularly over the past number of years, is a complete breakdown in the level of confidence that citizens have in our court system. The level of confidence that is required to ensure that citizens continue to have faith in the impartial execution of duties and obligations required by office holders. Particularly in this instance, Mark, you mentioned the DPP. We could use the DPP as an example of the breakdown in the degree of confidence of the citizens. Mark, we had the Dharamlal situation, and we would have seen the statements issued by the DPP. We would have seen her reactions and ultimately her posture, which resulted in the fact that no charge would have been instituted against Mr. Dharamlal on a very important and serious allegation. It was almost as if the DPP was complicit in a pantomime, as I call it, to result in time being expired so that the police could engage in a certain course of conduct. And Mark, you would have seen the alacrity by which the DPP would have proceeded to charge not only the electoral officers, but most recently, the quick moves by the DPP to institute charges against Mr. Patterson. Mark, you would have seen the fact that the government would have instituted charges, would have allowed the public to come to the conclusion that maybe they had some merit in these charges against the electoral officers in the first place. After 3 years, there'd be no charges being put or no evidence being brought before the court. Mark, you would have seen the issue of the government's failure and the repeated failure of the government, even though there's currently a court order by Justice Damon Young requiring the government and the president in particular to engage in consultations for the appointment of a chancellor and chief justice. So, Mark, the conclusion that is being arrived at by citizens across the country, that they have lost confidence in the court system, in the particular office holders, in this particularly the DPP, I believe it is grounded in their experience and is grounded in their reality, a reality which I cannot deny would have some degree of substance and merit.
All right, you're now joining us. It's 31 minutes after 9 o'clock. My name is Mark Penchap. Guys, as you come on the show, you know this is a program where we stay focused on the subject matter and our guest, indeed. That's why we ensure all the trench croppers are where they belong, in the trenches. Speaking of trenches, and now that we're on to fires, what's happening, Mr. Forde, with all of the fires? Now we have 13 passenger boats destroyed in Freedom Hope. What's happening with all of these fires, sir?
Mark, the Guyanese people have come to the conclusion that this is a governmental fire. This is just another recent example where fire seems to be affecting the lives of the Guyanese people. We've had homes destroyed. We've had, in this instance, business places destroyed. We now have boats destroyed. And most importantly, and most tragically, Mark, we would have had the situation of the Madhya Dam, where 20 young persons would have lost their lives. But Mark, part of what is happening here is the government's inability to put in place the necessary regime to ensure that the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Fire Service, and the other security agencies are provided with not only the tools, but the resources to ensure that they could confront these matters.
Certainly, they're incapable of confronting these matters. Mr. Forde, which leads me to this other question. We've been hearing about the Madja Commission of Inquiry into that deadly dorm fire. Nothing at all. Of course, from a legal standpoint, an attorney, what is your take on this sluggish Madja Commission of Inquiry? Nothing at all so far, sir.
Mark, the government has announced that it will implement and appoint this commission. As far as I'm aware, from the public um, posturings and publications of the government, they've only appointed Mr. Joe Singh as the chairman of that commission without further constituting it with any other members. But Mark, more importantly, the government proceeded to make a public statement um, and agreements being signed by persons, the parents of the children who would have lost their lives, to make payments and compensation arrangements. The government would have made arrangements to pay $5 million for loss of life and $3 million for the trauma, the lifetime trauma that they described it as. I believe that that was in itself an act that was improper by the government, improper by the Attorney General. I believe that those matters ought to have awaited a determination of liability by the commission and a recommendation by the commission as to what sort of compensation, the degree, level, and quantity of the compensation should have come from the commission. So you have on one hand the government trying to obviate and blunt much of the work of the commission. So Mark, we have a very serious situation where up to now this commission at all has not been set up.
It has not been set up. That by itself is a disrespect to the victims and those who died, also their loved ones and the entire nation. There's a question here from one of the members. Go ahead, sir. Yep.
Mark, is more than just simply the disrespect. What has happened here also, Mark, and I want the Guyanese people to know that this government would have been a signatory to a number of international conventions which would have provided how the government must treat with indigenous people. The entire fiasco from the incident itself and the government consequential acts are certainly matters which would be in breach of its international obligations.
And we already know that there's a big cover up as it pertains to this dorm fire, this deadly dorm fire. We are aware of the cover up. But I noticed that there's a question from Ms. Booker, and she's asking, please ask Mr. Forde to give his opinion on the St. Gabriel lockups that was built as a school.
Mark, that is another travesty. It shows that the government's lack of focus on the welfare of the Guyanese people. Mark, that is nothing that ought to have happened. There's no need for that sort of embarrassment to take place in this country, but it shows the orientation of the government not to provide the Guyanese people with the sort of resources that they need. This is at a time when the government is spending millions and billions of dollars on all sorts of institutional work and all sorts of infrastructural work. And in this particular situation, Mark, it is a complete embarrassment.
A major embarrassment indeed, typical of the PPP, just a bunch of embarrassing situation. Billions of dollars in contracts to their friends and their cronies. The sugar industry is dead. What about the economy? As you drive around, you walk around in communities throughout the country. What are some of the things that you're hearing, complaints by the people that we might not be privy to on social media, sir?
Mark, when you go into the communities, you see a marked disparity between what the government is saying is happening in the country in terms of whatever the government figures are showing, the degree of growth that is taking place in terms of numbers, as I put it. But Mark, when you actually go into the communities, the Guyanese people are saying that they are without jobs, they are without hope, and they don't have any confidence in the government. People are continuing to live lives that are not compatible with the sort of economic growth taking place in the country. Children are still going to school hungry. They are situations where parents are unable to provide the quality of life for themselves and for their children. These are very basic issues, Mark, which you would not see the government focusing on. You would not see the government news outlets, newsroom, and those other outlets focusing on. So this economic boom that is taking place in the country, Mark, up to now has not provided any measurable improvement in the quality of lives of the Guyanese people. They're still suffering from high prices in the supermarket, high prices and runaway inflation across the length and breadth of the country, the ability to purchase items for their own upkeep, the inability to acquire a home, purchase a car. So, Mark, as a matter of fact, despite all this sort of economic growth in terms of numbers that the government continue to report, the quality of life is deteriorating and has deteriorated. And the government has not put in place any mechanism to deal with it. You see, Mark, the government going around the country and giving people a cash handout, though the people need it and they take it, is not sufficient to improve their lives over a period of time or in any sustained manner.
Certainly not in any sustained manner at all. But Mr. Forde, let's not forget the promises made by the PPPC as they are about to celebrate their being installed into office as of tomorrow, because really there's nothing else really there to celebrate. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So we know that the audience want to interact, but Mr. Benjamin, there are times when the audience will interact, and we'll get to that, please, sir. All right, calm down, calm down. But what about the 50,000 jobs promised? What about the free education, free university education, and all these promises? Are they going to, the PPP, are they going to be celebrating that tomorrow? 50,000 jobs? Where are those jobs? What about the education that's supposed to be free at the university level, Mr. Forde?
Well, Mark, the Guyanese people are well aware that there's no reason to celebrate those things. Those were promises made. The people have not seen 50,000 new jobs. They have not seen the university fee arrangement being changed. Mark, even at the schools, parents continue to have to buy books. There's continuous need to have your children attend lessons in the afternoons or early in the mornings to be able to write CXC, ranging all the way down to SSE or the National Grade 6 Assessment Exam. So, Mark, we have that challenge in the community. So, in terms of education, Mark, it continues to be a failure. The government continues not to say what really is the pass rate at the National Grade 6 Assessment. I continue to be happy for all the children that write the National Grade 6 Assessment. But when you actually pay attention to the numbers, you would see that thousands of children, Mark, will fail that exam, which is supposed to be a benchmark exam about the stage and nature of the quality of the education that those 11 and 12-year-old children would be receiving. And Mark, you having a situation where more than half the children are in fact failing that exam, you see that even with all the economic resources in the country, that is not being properly spent. All the billions of dollars that are being allocated to the education sector, most of it seems to be going in infrastructure work, not in terms of the payment of salaries to the teachers, improvement of skills, and this sort of early childhood development program and subsequent programs that are necessary to improve literacy and counting skills for young children.
Lots of counting skills for young children. 43 minutes after 9 o'clock, Wayne Forde, the guy from Plaisance, is with us, the accountant. He is with us. Mr. Forde, good evening. Just start off with a quick question for Mr. Forde, if you may have, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Wayne.
First of all, Mark, a pleasant good evening to you and to MP and Senior Counsel, Mr. Roysdale Forde. A pleasant good evening to you too, sir.
Let me just say, Mr. Caesar, thank you so much for sitting in yesterday. I didn't know how to begin this show, but you did a wonderful job. And so the people are asking for you to return more often. So I might as well just take a long vacation.
We'll have to discuss that, Mark.
Thank you.
But thank you anyway. My first question to Mr. Forde would be in relation to the petitions. And where are we with those petitions? Mr. Forde, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Wayne. When we are currently awaiting a decision of the Court of Appeal in relation to the petition that was heard by the Chief Justice and allowed to appeal to the Court of Appeal. That was last argued, I believe, in March 2022 before the Court of Appeal. In that petition, the issue was in relation to the validity of the mechanism that was put in place by GCOM to conduct the 60-day recount process. So in that petition, we challenged, or the 60-day, we challenged the validity of it as being unconstitutional. And the ability of GCOM by itself, using the Election Laws Amendment Act, to ascribe and confer upon itself lawmaking powers, which are in fact vested only in the National Assembly and the Parliament of Guyana. These were issues which were raised as a matter of the petition. The Chief Justice ruled against us, and we have appealed to the Court of Appeal. Interestingly, in the preparation for the appeal, we argued our case, the government argued their case, the PPP argued their case, and we had an opportunity to respond to their arguments. And in the course of preparing that presentation, that written presentation, a few days before we were supposed to complete it, the High Court of St. Vincent delivered a very important case dealing with exactly the same issue in terms of the government's ability and ministers' ability in that instance, as opposed to the Elections Commission in Guyana, ability to take upon himself and to pass what is in fact legislation. It was a decision that we believe that was very helpful to us, and we continue to await the decision of the Court of Appeal. We don't know when it will come down or when the court is likely to deliver its decision. That is in relation to the
before we get back to Mr. Caesar, and good question, Mr. Caesar, as it pertains to the elections petition, because everybody seemed to have forgotten about that. But why should such an important case, Mr. Forde, take so darn long before the appellate court hand down its decision? It's way too long now, isn't it, for such an important case?
Mark, I believe that it is a very long period of time. But as I indicated on another program a few days ago, we have to understand what is actually happening and how the government is impacting on the inability or ability of the Court of Appeal to deliver judgments in a more efficient manner. We have a situation, Mark, until recently, where the Judicial Service Commission was not constituted. We had a situation where the Attorney General Nandalal will come to this public and tell the citizens of this country almost every quarter that the Judicial Service Commission will be established. And this went on for 3 years. Without the Judicial Service Commission, judges cannot be appointed. Without the judges being appointed, the complement of judges remain limited. Judges retire over the period of time. In relation to the Court of Appeal, there are 3 judges to hear thousands of cases which are filed annually, and thousands of arguments to be presented to the Court of Appeal. So the government, on one hand, would have caused this situation and would have aggravated this situation. And I believe that, having regard to the burden of work which is on the judges, 3 judges, the chancellor, 2 court of appeal justices, it would certainly would have impacted on their ability to deliver judgments quickly, I believe, including this one. Recently, we would have had a decision from the Court of Appeal on the parliamentary secretary's case, which itself was argued some time ago. So I believe that while we would say, and I would agree, that it is some period of time would have passed, I believe objectively we could come to that conclusion. We must bear in mind what would have been the operating circumstances, which would have aggravated and caused this situation.
So Mr. Forde, just putting this kind of like in layman's terms here. Order 60, basically what you're saying is that order is illegal. It was never passed in the National Assembly and should have never happened. Right? That's what you're basically saying when it comes to Order 60. Because it seems to be like if that should have been something that was done from the legislative body, but it was not done that way. It was done by the Guyana Elections Commission, and they do not have the right. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man.
Right. So, and you know what? I'm having a difficult time understanding how it is that the Chief Justice can allow this. What it is that she is looking at. It's, I don't know, Mark.
A lot of people seem to
Yeah,
be. Thank you, Wayne.
I am confused. A
lot of people are indeed confused as to what's really going on. They might have an idea. I don't want to put you on a spot because you're a lawyer. You have to go and face the court. But there seem to be some sort of big diabolical conspiracy that's happening. And more so, go back to the question I asked, why the hold up in the appellate court with this important matter? The CCJ said that, look, and one of the things that I agree with them on is that electoral matters should be a matter of urgency. We're not seeing that here at all. Not a matter of urgency at all. Mr. Forde?
I agree with you, Mark. But what is happening in the country at large impacts these matters, Mark. Whilst I agree with you and Wayne that it has taken a very long period of time, I believe that there's merit in my contention tonight that the inability of the court to work faster, the inability of the court to have judges, the inability of the court to have a lighter burden is a considerable factor which continues to plague all of our courts. And as I said, Mark, on another show, I wanted to make the point that we continue to have these situations in which the court takes forever to deliver these decisions. And what happens in many instances, in many, many cases, especially public law, constitutional matters, because as the Shadow Attorney General, I profile many of these cases, you end up in a situation where at the time when you actually obtain a judgment in favor of your party or in favor of the witness or in favor of the client, it comes at a time when the essence of the story would have long expired. You would have spent years waiting for a decision and the underlying circumstances would have changed. The people would have come to a different conclusion. The government would have proceeded in a certain course of conduct that is almost irreparable. You would have seen it in the situation where the Attorney General wants to argue that the issue in relation to the removal of Mr. Slow and the disbandment, the unlawful and unconstitutional disbandment of the Police Service Commission is not an issue that the court should entertain anymore because they have now proceeded to appoint and constitute the Police Service Commission all over again. But those matters would have been in the courts. They would have been the subject of a number of arguments by the Attorney General, which would have been rejected. The court would have taken some time to consider it, and the government would have proceeded and moved along. So I'm agreeing with you that it has been a very long time, but I just want us to understand and have some appreciation for the contention that I'm making, that the court system needs to work in a more efficient manner, not only by the judges working faster, but by be giving the resources, including other judges, to complement the court system.
Mr.
You
Caesar?
know, yeah, Mark, one of the things that concerns me about the judicial system across Guyana, it seems as if that, some of these appointments are not being made. So therefore, the system is not working efficiently. We cannot move along cases like the petition cases and all these other high-end relevant cases expeditiously because of these shortages. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Whether it is that we have to, implement, more policy, in order to get these things done, something needs to be done here for sure. And, I'm going to say this. I heard Mr. Forde, the Honorable Mr. Roysdale Forde, just said, Shadow Attorney General. And I almost dung my head here because he has been lashing Anil Nandalal for 6s and 4s, man. It's just win after win, So the Attorney General in Guyana, Mark, I don't have much respect for that individual. I must say so.
There's a difference. There's a difference. Remember, Mr. Forde bought all of his law books, maybe at a good Austin's bookstore down there. But while I agree with you on that 100%, because nobody really has much respect for the Attorney General there now. The actual Attorney General is Roysdale Forde, and Roysdale has been beating up on poor Anil. Poor Anil licks like peas. But Roysdale, what is your take, sir, on the fact that 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, and after that, they have been sworn, installed into office, we were hearing about show your SOPs, the opposition, show your SOPs. What happened? They finished talking about SOPs, or are they ashamed to open their own SOPs now? Your take, sir.
But, and that is one of the travesties that took place after the installation of the government in August 2020. And I want to go back to Wayne's questions about the elections petitions, because Mark and Wayne, I only spoke about one election petition, if you would have recognized.
Correct.
We filed 2 elections petitions, the one that we spoke of and the other one. And the thought behind these processes would be that in one election petition, the issue of the constitutionality of the Order 60, GCOM's ability to act, would have been dealt with in a separate petition. And the evidence to support that petition would have been the very records produced by GCOM, which would have indicated that prior to the recount, the basis for the election would have been one set of figures, and after the recount, the basis for the election would have been another set of figures. So that was one electoral matter, one petition, and that is the one that is currently in the Court of Appeal. We're waiting a decision, those legal issues. But I'm happy that Mark would have put up on the screen there the substance of the other election petition, which the government cannot ever get over. That 61 dead persons were recorded as voting. I'm going to say it, over 4,800 voters, but actually voted. There were 150 stuffed ballot boxes, 47 ballot boxes without documents. I believe there were actually 49 ballot boxes without documents. And there was 1,278 missing oaths of identity. Now, when the government talking about statement of poll and you must show your statement of poll and so on, this election was not declared on any statement of polls. These elections were declared on the recount extracted from the ballot boxes. And I want the Guyanese public to never forget that the electoral mechanisms that were put in place, the Order 60, required GCOM and CARICOM agreed to this. All the international community agencies, electoral agencies agreed to this, that this was an audit. It was an audit to determine the credibility and the reliability of the elections, and an assessment was supposed to be made before the issue of any recount, results being used to declare a government. These are very serious matters. So when the opposition speak about a government being installed, Wayne and Mark, it is with substance. What happened was that after the recount process would have been completed, and this is notwithstanding CARICOM only looked at 12 or 13%, I believe, of the entire amount, GCOM went through the entire recount process. We had the chief elections officer who would have written to the chairman of the Elections Commission, and the commission saying that the results of the recount indicated that it is not such that the Electoral Commission and he, as electoral body, the chief electoral technical officer, could have any confidence in it, and it was not credible. The Elections Commission, by a majority, 4-7, the PPP and government side, together with the chairman, decided that they don't have the power. The chairman decided this, that they no longer have the power to determine and engage in an assessment of the credibility aspect of the recount order. So that was excised and removed from part of the recount order. It was amended and taken out, leaving the Elections Commission now with the recount order, which allowed them to declare a result on those numbers, which at the starting point, it was never to be done unless you would have concluded that the issue of credibility was being determined to the satisfaction of the commission. The chairman then announced at that stage that she don't have the power to determine credibility. That is a court matter. So when we look to see, when you're talking about statement of polls and statement of polls, we have to go back to what actually happened during the electoral process. We have to look back to the schemes and mechanisms and the three-card games that took place to ensure that this government was installed. When the record of these events are written, and I hope to be part of the group to write it at some point, you will conclude that this was a deliberate effort to bypass all the mechanisms that would have been put in place to ensure that the issue of credibility was to be determined. It was a condition upon which the recount took place. It was a condition upon which the recount took place. When the recount was completed, it was removed by the Elections Commission. They removed the condition under which the recount took place and then proceeded. So when we speak of the government being installed, it is with substance, it is with merit.
Thank you. Mr. Caesar?
Yes, Mark, with what Mr. Forde just said, and Roysdale, thank you for clarifying all of this. I mean, it's going to be very helpful to our viewing audience. But Mark, my next question to Mr. Forde would be, how confident should the voters in Guyana be going in to the 2025 elections, or even if elections happen to occur before 2025, seeing that tomorrow would mark 3 years since the PPPC would have been sitting in government and absolutely nothing has been done when it comes to correcting that bloated list that is being used over and over again. There is no type of electoral reform that would have occurred between the period of the 2020 elections and now. And I think that this should have happened based on all the confusion that we would have had. And this could have led to a whole lot of other things, because the normal man in the street, could have basically decided that no, this is not right. And if, let's say we go to 2025 elections and this would have occurred again, we're going to see a lot of civil disobedience across Guyana. The country is going to become uncontrollable. People are not going to, because this is bullying. This is dictatorship here. The list needs to be updated. Why is the list not updated? Why is GCOM not fulfilling their mandate to the people of Guyana? They are not operating as an organ that is separate from government, meaning an independent organ. They more seem to be an arm of the PPPC, since Ms. Claudette Singh always votes along with the PPPC and never with the APNU. It just shows biasness, and she just can't be trusted. Your take, Mr. Forde.
When what you've captured there is the dilemma of the country right now. And unless this is seriously addressed by all the stakeholders, this is not a question only of the government and the opposition. And we must understand that, as you correctly pointed out, there is a serious risk of social instability and breakdown that could easily occur in this country before or after an election. And you would have thought that the government would have been more responsible at a time when we are attracting a high amount of investment into this country to ensure that they create the environment that is conducive to greater economic investment in this country. But you see the reverse taking place. You see the government continuing on a course of conduct which is inconsistent with serious investment being put into this country. And you have to ask yourself, why is this taking place? Is it that the international community and the international investors have come to the conclusion that the Guyanese people have grown so docile and so weak and so ineffective that they have now accepted these circumstances that you spoke about? Now, you asked me one particular question, which I'll get back to, and I'll answer it now. I believe that with regards to what is happening in this country right now in terms of GCOM and what is unfolding, when you pay attention to what the government sought to change through some degree of reform, it was to ensure that they take greater control of the electoral processes. It was to ensure that discretions are limited and restricted. It was to ensure that they continue to have control through a chief elections officer that they wanted to have put in place. A person who, according to the Elections Commission rules, may not have satisfied the requirements in the first place. You have a situation where the deputy chief elections officer was somebody who was accused of taking away and doing all sorts of things during the last election. So you've seen from a human resource level that there's an effort to stock the Elections Commission with a certain type of person to occupy certain types of important offices. You see that the government, as you said, is making every effort to ensure that it takes control, therefore, of the entire commission. And indeed, I believe that the chairman of the Elections Commission, it's a fact, would have voted on almost every single occasion when a matter came down for a vote, would have voted with the government. Now, this chairman of the Elections Commission ought to be aware that there's a need for this list and that it is bloated. All sorts of misinterpretations are being given by the chairman and the appointed members of the commission to ensure that the list remains the same. This list is lacking in credibility. Every single electoral body that came in and was part of the management and observation of the last electoral process said that the list lacked credibility and it needed to be changed. So to go back to a next election with the same list, I can't see that the Guyanese people would be in a position to come to a conclusion that those same state of affairs are such that would give them any degree of confidence. The government has come out against biometrics, then they seem to have come partly in favor of it, then they seem to have retreated once again from the entire process of biometrics. The list needs to be clean, it needs to be cleansed. We need, as a matter of fact, fundamentally a new list to be determined. We need to ensure, as a matter of policy, that the Guyana registration division is kept separate from the Guyana Electoral Commission. We need to ensure that there is national oversight over the production and issuance and recording of births and deaths in this country. That need to be over parliamentary control. We have persons who are coming into this country, and I'm well aware of it. It's one thing to prove it, but we will get to that point where people are coming into this country and obtaining birth certificates who are not Guyanese. We are aware that they're seeking to register and would in fact registered persons who are not Guyanese in an efforts to further bloat the electoral list. So these are very serious issues. And they, for me, they are the most important issues in this country right now because it goes to the core of a lawful method by which the people of this country could rid themselves of this government. And it's going to come to a particular point where it is going to be forcibly brought to the attention of the international community and all the stakeholders of this country.
Well said, Mr. Roysdale Forde, Senior Counsel, also Member of Parliament. As we look at program time, I know Wayne is going to say we have all the time in the world indeed, but I'm sure Mr. Roysdale Forde has a busy schedule, always out there to celebrate with his family. And again, congratulations. Your son recently graduated out there in Canada. And we all celebrate with you, sir. We all celebrate with you. One quick question. I don't know what other questions Mr. Caesar may have, but let me just ask about this here, as it's happening currently in the U.S. It is happening. We see here former President Trump indicted in federal January 6th investigation. The Department of Justice notified the former president of the charges tied to the events of the 2021 Capitol insurrection on Tuesday. That's today he was actually charged. And there's a reason for this, because their tune in Guyana was totally different. As we listened to Mike Pompeo when he was Secretary of State, when he was Secretary of State, Biden won the elections, and this is what he said. I'm not sure if he's one of the four that were actually charged.
Hi.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes. When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is functional today, successful today, and successful with the president who's in office on January 20th, mid-afternoon, will also be successful. I went through a transition on the front, and I've been on the other side of this. I'm very confident that we will do all the things that are necessary to make sure that the government, the United States government, will continue to perform its national security function as we go forward.
So you believe there's
Mr. Forde, you're a lawyer. How dangerous was that statement by then Secretary of State that there will be a second Trump swearing in, even after they lost the elections? But his tune there at that press conference was totally different from what they had for Guyana. Explain it to us, please, before we get to Mr. Caesar.
Well, Mark, in relation to that, I said earlier that we needed to have the public understand um, what happened in Guyana in relation to those elections, and that it was a deliberate effort by the Guyana Elections Commission as the instrument who was calling the electoral process to remove processes which would have dealt with the question of credibility and reliability and the audit element. Because if it had come to the conclusion that those issues were not credible, you could not have gone on to a question of a declaration. And I believe that we were witnessing an installation of a government for which the Elections Commission was complicit. Um, in relation to what Mr. Pompeo said there, I believe that that was after the January 6th event, Mark. Was that after?
Oh no, that was before the January 6th event. It was probably about a week before or a little more before. It was right after the general elections when Biden won those elections, but yet he claimed that there would be a second Trump. Maybe he will be indicted, who knows? But it wasn't
But
before the January
it
6th.
is certainly possible based on what evidence would implicate him. I don't know the circumstances in relation to what he would have known personally in relation to that matter.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Forde. But I'm sure Mr. Caesar has another question for you as we close off tonight's program. But I want to ask Mr. Caesar a question. Tomorrow happens to be the 2nd of August. What's there to celebrate? Guyana is a rich country, but the PPP is managing the country as though it's poor with a bunch of handouts, and they're begging with their begging baskets around the world. God in heaven knows what they're begging. Cost of living is high, nothing close to the 50,000 jobs the Irfan promised, nothing at the University of Guyana, no free education there as they have promised. What is there to celebrate tomorrow, Mr. Caesar?
Mark, absolutely nothing. The people continue to be marginalized in Guyana and treated without dignity and respect. Cost of living is through the roof. We do have a framework in place in Guyana for democracy, but as we all know, sitting on this panel here, the PPPC is not the dancing partner to partner with that framework. The PPPC, we go around and we say that Guyana is a democratic country, but I am going to disagree. Guyana is not a functioning democracy. Okay? It's leaning more towards a dictatorship. Look what the PPPC would have done to our opposition. Cut their budget. They don't want to be opposed. They do not want to be opposed. We had the whole decision about the ID cards for our people. The PPPC went out there. They made that decision on their own without consulting the opposition. How can we call that democracy? The APNU have more of an electorate compared to the PPPC. The APNU can flat out win an election in Guyana. The PPPC can only, and I wouldn't say win an election, can only cheat their way to an election based on that list, that current list that they have there. Without that list, there is no path for this installed government. Hence the reason we need to put pressure on GCOM. And, Mr. Forde, I know that you're a very cool and calm guy, but we're going to have to protest, and we're going to have to protest hard. Democracy is something that if you want it, you have to go there and fight for it. And I think that our backs are getting against the wall because we're getting closer. We cannot wait until election is upon us then to go and, pressure GCOM for a new list, they're going to say it's too late. They're going to say it's too late. And, we're going to either have to push election to 2026 or 2027 while they correct it. We need the list to be corrected now. And the PPPC, they have a right, right? They have a right to say that they don't want biometrics. Because with biometrics, Mr. Forde, there is absolutely no chance for the PPPC to win an election in Guyana. Because you cannot rig biometrics. It's very difficult. It's not going to be an easy task. And one of the concerns I have is that they weren't in power and they were able to rig the 2020 elections. Now that they're in power, and let's say we go to elections without a new list, they're going to devastate us. They're going to rig this thing. They're going to really rig the election again. And the people of Guyana will not stand for that. When people go out there and demonstrate their democratic right, they want to see the results. And GCOM has been denying the Guyanese people their democratic rights. And I don't care what Claudette Singh is talking about, she being threatened and all these type of things. That's not our business. You can't take the heat. You need to get out of the kitchen. We need reform at the Guyana Elections Commission. We need reform. Reforms has to be put in place before 2025. Mark, over to you.
Thank you so much. Reform indeed. We want to thank all of our listeners. I know it's a holiday in Guyana. All of you in Guyana and around the world, Rhonda Lane, we always say a special good evening to you. Colin Barnwell, Carol Roberts, and all you beautiful people, Desiree Simons, and the entire crew. If we don't call your name, Tony Hack and others, don't get upset. Shondell Griffith, how are you? Mr. Roysdale Forde, I don't know what else we can say, but tomorrow in all of the papers that are controlled by the PPPC, we're going to have this sort of glorification of August 2nd. It takes center stage of August 1st. Mind you, nothing much they did, if anything at all, for August 1st. But watch out for tomorrow. Your message to the Guyanese people as we wrap up tonight's program. Your closing remarks, please, sir.
I just wanted to deal with something that Wayne said.
Sure.
Wayne, I agree that we must confront GCOM. And for me, it's not just a question of protesting locally at GCOM, but the protests must become nationwide, and the Guyanese people must become very sensitized and educated on this entire issue. I believe that we, together with the diaspora, will have to intensify our presence and our articulation of these issues. I know yourself and Mark will be doing it on your programs, but I believe that we have to spread it all across the international community. And I believe also we have to tie this issue to the quality of investments and the nature of investments that are taking place in Guyana. But Mark, I believe that when we look back, and the Guyanese people look back to where they were from 2020 August to now, that there's no measurement, there's no barometer that will indicate that their lives would have been better. I like to look at it in a very simple way. We could look to see what is happening in your pocket, in your wallet, and you're worse off. We could look to see what is the condition of the Guyana police force, and you're worse off. You could look to see what is the condition of the court system, and you're worse off. You could look to see what is happening in the hospitals. You could see what is the condition of the children's education across the length and breadth of the country. The deterioration in the general environment in which you live, the increase in corruption, the government's disregard for the rule of law and the Constitution. So on every possible barometer, the treatment of indigenous people, the treatment of women, the treatment of young girls, the total disdain and lack of attention to the elderly, the failure to restore the NIS, the condition of Parliament under the Speaker that we have, who's there to seek and to anticipate and protect the government and to thwart scrutiny. The government's failure to ensure that there's a functioning Parliament, an effective Parliament, the efforts to override the Public Accounts Committee, and the successful efforts to override the Public Accounts Committee, which is supported by the Speaker. They failed to constitute the Judicial Service Commission, the Police Service Commission for many years. They failed to put in place any mechanism to ensure that the Chancellor and Chief Justice would have been appointed. They failed to articulate a comprehensive foreign policy. We don't really know what is happening with the Ministry of Finance. They failed to articulate a consistent and steady agenda for national development, the allocation of resources, public corruption, public tendering for contracts, who gets them, why you get them, the government's disregard for the Guyanese people. You remove the High Commissioner from India, and he's still there as part of the pork belly arrangement and the fat to be given out to your friends. The failure to present the government with any serious plan for development, for the improvement of people's lives. So you can't come to the conclusion by any stretch of the imagination that the government has done well, or that the government has to put in place any mechanism to make your life better. And I saw a little tape, Mark, I don't know if you all saw it, about persons lining up and standing up and lining up in Region 5, I believe it was, to receive a cash handout. Now, that in itself is proof that your life is not better off, because you have to stand up to get this cash payout, this cash handout, and whilst you must go and collect it and it is yours, this is not a sustainable way in which you could look after your family. It is not coming to you in terms of a salary increase that you yourself could monitor it and say, I could put up this, I could put up that. This is a one-off payment that you're not sure when it's coming again. And it's no considerable sum that you're receiving. Up to now, there's no serious jobs that are taking place, the creation of jobs for the young people. You see them announcing that they have to hire so many foreigners to come into the country, to be nurses and to be doctors and truck drivers and bus drivers. Those are skills that we should be able to put in place to train our young people. The government has abandoned the community school arrangements in which you try to put serious skills in the hands of young people. There's no mechanism to guide them from being qualified, even if it's a simple skill, into a job. The Guyanese people are not benefiting from the access to oil in any way. It's not making their lives better. How many local Guyanese companies, indigenous companies that are not friends and supporters of the government are able to access the oil resources, are able to build for contracts? When we spoke earlier, Mark, and at the beginning of your show, and I spoke about the role that African Guyanese people played in the establishment and building of this country, they are entitled to participate in the wealth of this country, not for it to be given out to you because you're in a corner there, but as of right. And I believe that the fact that the government is engaging in an economic system which seeks to exclude you, and you're excluded, you could check to see how many African Guyanese, how many Amerindians, how many Chinese are benefiting from projects. How many of them are able to access the resources of the country to bid for these contracts? So you got to understand that this is a government that is not about empowering people. It is about ensuring that you remain subjugated, whilst at the same time putting up this front of one Guyana. So whilst our people have to celebrate emancipation, they have to understand that we are in a system now that is very reminiscent of earlier periods of exploitation and subjugation. As my friend Christopher Jones said on his Facebook page, then you were in physical chains, but now you are in different types of chains that you can't see and touch in the same way, but you could look to see what is happening to you, and you'll be able to see that you are being put in a position where you're seen limited from accessing the resources. And that is the greatest challenge that we face at this time, coupled with a government that is determined and bent always on ensuring that they don't comply with the law. You couple that with an electoral system that is lacking in credibility, you have an autocratic state. So I want us to understand what we are up against. I want the Indian people to understand what they're up against. Because when I say Indian people, let us measure and go through the communities. Even in their own communities, they're suffering. When we go into those villages, they're complaining. They can't get jobs. Life is hard on them. And Mark and Wayne, you would know, hunger and poverty sometimes don't have no face, right? The condition that you live in, it is sometimes as a result of the government creating those circumstances and limitations. And in many communities that we would have visited, the condition of the African Guyanese, the condition of the East Indian, on the ground, living the ordinary life, suffering in this beautiful one Guyana, in all its billions, it is no great difference in terms of what you see. But the government is going to go into the communities to aggravate differences and to create walls and separate people who are suffering equally. And I believe that this is one of the important mandates of the opposition, which is to go into the communities and to let the people understand that you may look different, but you suffer, you must under this government, and it is the same. And I believe that that will play a fundamental role in the people understanding what is happening and the people rallying to causes, not parties necessarily, rallying to causes which would see a fundamental change in this country.
Thank you, Senior Counsel Roysdale Forde, Member of Parliament, a brilliant lawyer, a patriotic individual, busy all around the country. Let me take this time out to just salute and congratulate you. All those cases you have won on behalf of the people of Guyana. Thank you so much for your service, sir. And I know great things are ahead for you. But Mr. Caesar, can't leave you without a closing remark. Your closing remarks after that magnificent performance last evening. I just want to give up and say, look, let Caesar and others take over. But again, let me publicly thank you. Great job. Caesar is a young man, just came out, started to give his opinion publicly on this show. And many people, Mr. Forde, were just so pleased with his the way he handled the show last evening, like a real expert. Thanks again, Mr. Caesar. Your closing remarks, sir.
Sure, Mark, not a problem. My closing remarks tonight. First, I just want to, thank Senior Counsel and MP, Mr. Roysdale Forde. It was a real pleasure sharing this platform with you tonight. You were excellent in answering all the questions and very, very edifying answers. So it was a pleasure spending time with you. And Mark, of course, it's always a pleasure being with you on the program here.
Yeah,
my closing remarks is going to be very short. We look at time here. I would just like to summarize basically what Mr. Forde would have said, which, basically equals to lawlessness. As we head into tomorrow where the PPPC would have been sitting there as an installed government for 3 years. And basically they're committing economic genocide against the Guyanese people. They have done absolutely nothing for our people over the 3 years. Mr. Forde is completely right, and I'm 100% in support of that statement. Absolutely nothing for our people. Going forward, we have to hold our frontal position. We cannot let loose of this government. We have to keep them in check. And look, I look forward to success in our country because we're not giving up. You just have to look at today. You know, there's not a whole lot going on for the people of Guyana, Mark and Roysdale, but they were not hesitant to come out today and celebrate emancipation in remembrance of our foreparents, our ancestors, what they would have done, what they would have accomplished. So basically, this tells me that our people are educated. They're starting to really pay attention to what's going on, and they are going to be very frontal. We have to remove the PPPC government. Listen, they put this whole slogan, this whole quote that they're a caring government. This is the most uncaring government Guyana has ever seen. To have all the resources that we have passing through our country, and to have a government make a decision to have these resources not trickle down to our people, it's a shame. It's a shame. And across Guyana, and I speak to all 6 ethnic groups, while our perspectives might be very diverse, let's have one common goal: to remove the PPPC and to see Guyana be a successful, sovereign, developing nation. That's my closing remarks. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Roysdale.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Wayne,
Caesar. Go ahead. Yeah, Mr.
and I
Forde.
just wanted to congratulate Wayne on his performance last night.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Forde.
And everybody seemed to be telling me, hang my hat up and give it over to but Wayne is a challenge. I got to, all right, I know what I'm going to do from now on. But on a serious note, great job, Mr. Caesar. Thank you all our listeners from around Guyana, around the world. Emancipation Day greetings to you guys. Tomorrow is just a sad day for all Guyanese, for a regime that has been installed. And you see the evidence is there. Mr. Forde spoke of them. Mr. Caesar spoke of them as well. You all know as well. So don't fall for the propaganda tomorrow. There's nothing to celebrate from this PPP regime. 3 years in office, 3 years of misery, 3 years of depression, 3 years of high cost of living, 3 years of persecution, you name it. 3 years of broken promises, no free education at the university level, 50,000 jobs. People are lining up for part-time jobs, a handful of part-time jobs. Look who are getting all the contracts and becoming richer and richer. Just friends and family members of the PPP regime. Nothing else, nothing more. And all Guyanese, regardless, as our gentlemen, both Mr. Forde and Caesar said earlier, all Guyanese are suffering. Every single, it doesn't matter their ethnicity. But it's unfortunate that this corrupt PPP regime seem to specifically they're targeting specifically persons of African descent. But we can touch on that tomorrow and many other days to come. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much. And again, Mr. Forde, congratulations, your son's success story, and also for all that you do for all of us on the ground there in Guyana. Thank you, Roysdale. Thank you, Caesar.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good night to your audience.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, guys.
So, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington law firm located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 877-3100.
And you're confident that you're going to deliver credible and fair elections?
Of course. Only one way I know, and that is the correct way.
Yeah, my name is Justity Caldata Francis Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my X next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data.
Basement, level vibes with another one, straight up, blackness aye, who tell the truth, Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benskop, straight up from the root, Mark Benskop, who tell the truth, Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benskop, straight up from the root, Mark Benskop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money, straight up, him attack, educating everybody, big up my friends, and big up my family, turn on the radio.